All right, so this brings us to stage number 4. Um, I'm excited about the Restory stage, one of my favorite stages. And so this stage is really about, we've already identified the goal, and we're on stage 5 going to talk about the action, but we've got to have a bridge between those. And this is kind of getting at the why. Okay, so this is what we want to work on, but in order for us to actually do something about it, thinking about stages of change, then we got to talk about why it's so important for us to change the story, the reality of how things have been. And so this is where it gets us to that place of let's explore what we can do different than what we've already been doing. So usually, I mean, that's right, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so really, this is an opportunity for you to do some questioning in a different way. So there's 2 things that I want you guys to try to do just to simplify this during this particular stage. One of those is asking an exception question. An exception question. So typically, people are, when they're coming in to talk to somebody and working through and processing through a difficult situation, they're focused on the difficult situation. They're focused on the problem, right? And so this is where you're going to try to help them to think about what is the solution. So if it's been an issue where I always get into this argument with my mom about her beliefs about, how I should, dress, or who my friends are, or, there's some conflict, parent child. This is just another example I'm throwing out there, right? And so every time we argue, I get upset. She loses her cool. We yell at each other, and so if that's what happens, you're going to ask an exception question. So, has there ever been a time where you've had a difference of opinion and you didn't get into a heated argument? Has there ever been a time where, when you felt alone, you were able to connect with somebody, and they were able to encourage you and you felt better after that conversation? Has there ever been a time? So that's an exception question. Has there ever been a time um, that you've thought differently, felt differently, did something differently about the problem? Okay. And so you want to you want to pose that question, because if they can tell you about an exception. So typically, when I get mad, this is what happens. But there was that one time where I was able to remain calm, and then you want to explore. So why was that? Tell me more about that. Again, you're asking those small prompts to get more information. So that's what you're doing. That's one of the things I want you guys to do during the Restory stage, which is stage 4, is to ask an exception question. The other thing I want you to try to do is to actually to do a reframe, which is a little tricky. So let me give you some examples. I have a sheet that I'm going to send to you guys. Basically, you're going to take an attribute about a person or a thing or a situation, and you're going to look at it from a different perspective. So you're going to give a reframe. For example, somebody might be telling you about, my parents are so bossy. They're always trying to get up in my business and tell me what to do. And so instead of calling them bossy, the reframe might be, it sounds like your parents are really genuinely concerned about you, and they take proactive steps to ensure that they provide the leadership and care that you need, right? So that's looking at it from a different perspective. Another one is like, everybody thinks I'm defiant, like I don't follow rules, I don't obey. Well, maybe you just have strong held beliefs, and maybe you're just bold, and maybe you have self determination. So it's like taking a negative, right, a negative attribute, and thinking about what might be the positive qualities. This is a really revolutionary concept that really helps people in their stage of change process, because the truth is that most of our weaknesses are overutilized or underutilized strengths. Think about that for a second. Some of the things that we know about ourselves that we would consider to be our weak spots are actually our strengths that are being overutilized. I'll give you one example just to help frame up this concept for you guys. So for me, we talked about this, pretty calm. It takes a lot for me to get upset, which is, generally speaking, that's a strength, right? But if it's to the point where I'm just passive about everything and I don't get upset, even if somebody's breaking into my house and taking my kids out, I'm like, oh, it's all right, no biggie, just make sure they get back by 9 o'clock. So that's where it becomes a weakness, where my easygoing, calm demeanor could actually be a negative attribute. And so there's usually a silver lining when we think about these things. If there's, let's look at the other extreme, a person who maybe talks too much, which talking and communicating effectively can be a really good strength. But if you do it to an extreme, it becomes a weakness. And so really when you're doing a reframe is you're looking at what is a perceived weakness and seeing what is the strength about this? What is the strong point? Is there a silver lining even in this attribute about a person? And if you can call that out and if you can identify something, man, that's awesome, because then that helps them to think differently about that whole situation. Maybe it's not just because my parents are bossy. Maybe it's because they actually do care about me. So again, it's helping to shift their thought perspective about it, and giving it from a different perspective is really what you're trying to do. Taking that negative, turning it into a positive. It's like the classic example of, is the glass half empty or is it half full? And so when you're doing a reframe, you're looking at the glass and you're describing it in terms of being half full instead of talking about it as being half empty. All right?